Good morning, Walt Disney Studios. How may I direct your call?
Yes. Mr. Feige's office, please. Please hurry.
One moment, please.
Come on. Come on. Hello. You've
good,
reached
I finally
the
got to you,
office
Mr.
of Kevin Feige, Marvel extraordinaire. I'm not available right now because, well, I'm off printing money. Leave a message and I'll get back to you when I can.
Excelsior!
Yes, Mr. Feige, this is Sony Pictures. I don't know how to say this, but like the Amazing Spider-Man 2, it's happened again. Please help us. Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to an all-new Talkin Movies. As always, I am your host, the real Geno Reynolds, and today we're gonna be talking about Venom, which is based on the Marvel Comics Spider-Man villain starring Tom Hardy, Michelle Williams, Tom Hardy, and Woody Harrelson. We'll get to that one in a bit. Let's talk about the beginning of Sony's universe of Marvel characters. Now, really, are they really still going to call it that? I have a feeling that one's going to change. Just so you know, there will eventually be spoilers in this review, a lot of them, so there's your warning. At least the first one. While investigating a shady businessman, reporter Eddie Brock ends up merging with an alien to form a symbiotic creature known as Venom. Before I start talking about this movie, I'll let those that don't want any spoilers know that I really kind of didn't like this one. While I thought Tom Hardy tried really hard to make this movie good with his performance, I felt that just about everything about this movie was generic. The effects felt a little outdated, and most of the characters are pretty forgettable. I don't even recommend this one to go see in theaters. That being said, I can already tell that this one is going to split audiences and critics. I'm just giving you my fair and honest opinion about this one. I'm not in the middle. I'm somewhere a little below the middle of the road on this one. There was things to like. There was a lot of things I really hated. Is it the dumpster fire that the critics are making it out to be? No. Is it the greatest superhero movie of all time, like I'm sure some fans will say? Definitely not. So, again, little less than middle of the road with my thoughts on this movie. So, okay, with that out of the way, let's get into some spoilers, and I mean a lot of spoilers. Are you still with me? Okay, here we go. Before I begin, actually, false start. I need to tell a little story from 2010 to explain my thought process here. In June of 2010, about a full year before I was even a critic, I was really looking forward to the big screen version of The A-Team. Now, I know a lot of people don't like that movie, but I do. I loved it in theaters, and I even bought it, and it has the extended cut, and I watch it every now and then. The thing is, as excited as I was for that movie, and as much as I like it, there was a movie that came out about 2 months before that was kind of a better version of it in a way. In April, there was a highly underrated movie that came out called The Losers. It stars some little-known actors such as Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Zoe Saldana, Chris Evans, Idris Elba, Jason Patrick. To this day, while I still love the A-Team movie, The Losers is a movie I watch multiple times a year and am still pissed that there was never a sequel made. By the way, when I talked to Jeffrey Dean Morgan at a a comic convention, don't want to get sued by San Diego Comic-Con, he said he still wants a sequel too. Crazy people think alike, I guess. Well, holy shit. Geno, you ask, what the hell does this have to do with Venom? Well, you see, there's a little movie that came out in June of this year called Upgrade, and I've reviewed it, and you can find the review on my channel. And while I saw this moment of deja vu coming a mile away this time, Upgrade is a way better version of Venom, in some ways anyway, in a lot of ways anyway. The only difference between the 2010 movies that were similar and these two, Venom just isn't that good. Now, I can't say it was for the lack of trying. I thought Tom Hardy tried really hard to make this a good movie. While some of the duality conversations between Brock and Venom were kind of silly, some of them were actually pretty funny. One example is when Venom wants Brock to jump out of the window of a skyscraper. Brock decides to take the elevator instead. As he exits the elevator, Venom calls Brock a pussy, and it's really funny. There are other moments like that, and some of them are hits and some of them are misses. I think fans will be split on how long it took Venom to actually appear in the movie. While the voices come pretty much right after Brock and Venom merge, we don't get to see a full-on Venom until at least halfway into the movie. I wasn't really timing it, but it took a while. I was okay with the movie taking its time to set up the character, even though I could see it getting ready to take the right turn to generic town. The problem with most of the full Venom suit stuff is that the effects are okay, but not great. And when we get to the big symbiote battle near the end of the movie, the effects just become hard to follow dark blobs. On a funny side note, going into my next part of the review, when Bobby Fish from Luke Cage left to go to San Diego to give his daughter a kidney, he instead ended up in San Francisco, changed his identity, and became Eddie Brock's boss. I kid. But it's always strange to see an actor in technically the same universe play two different characters, where he's Bobby Fish in Luke Cage, and he's Eddie's boss in this movie, and they're both played by Ron Cephas Jones. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about San Francisco, shall we? One thing I wonder going into this movie is Eddie Brock going to be a reporter in New York? The answer is no. He's in San Francisco. The movie mentions that he was quote, ran out of New York. So who knows what that really means. You kind of get the gist, seeing the kind of reporter he is. I think this was a smart move on the part of the filmmakers, because if Eddie was in New York, if you're like me, you'd be more apt to still want to connect him to Spider-Man. More on that in a bit. The Stan Lee cameo is kind of cool, but it's also not one of the better ones. It's just simple. He says something neat, but it's not like he's working with the Watchers again, in this one. The plot of the movie is probably its biggest downfall. It's about as cookie cutter as you can get when it comes to a superhero movie. Introduce hero, introduce love interest, introduce bad guy, hero gets powers, hero has love interest problems, hero goes after the bad guy somehow gets powers, power people fight, good guy wins, sequel bait, wash, rinse, repeat. I think we are getting to a point where even Marvel in the MCU is having trouble finding new ways of keeping things interesting, let alone Sony trying to emulate what Marvel already has done in both good and bad ways. Another problem in this movie is the villain, or I guess I can say villains. Carlton Drake, before and after he becomes Riot, is boring. Long story short, every comic book movie villain now has a pretty steep mountain to climb ever since we got Thanos. If the villains would have been fun funny or anything other than generic, I would have probably been okay with them. But there is nothing really interesting about either of them. They're just boring. When it comes to the action of the movie, some of it works and some of it doesn't. But pretty much all of it is hampered by the movie's effects. While I kind of enjoyed the action scenes where Eddie was not in control of his own body, where the Venom suit is just, going around his arms and popping out of his back and things like that, I thought that stuff was okay. Still, the effects wasn't the greatest, but it was kind of fun. It's what you expect out of Venom. So that stuff was fine. But then again, I'm going to mention the movie Upgrade again. I've seen it done way better in that movie. My hunch about the tattoo becoming the chest symbol instead of the spider was wrong. And that's only because they didn't put anything on his chest at all. Maybe they were trying to separate themselves from the Spider-Man even more. I don't know. Again, more on that in a second. My hunch about the ending of the movie being in the trailer was pretty much spot on. Ever since the trailer showed the convenience store scene, the turd in the wind, we are Venom scene. Ever since seeing that, I've been saying that it would be the end of, or part of the end of the movie. And it was. I can't stand trailers that do that. Don't show me the end of the movie. And what about Woody Harrelson, you ask? Was he not in the movie? Well, technically no, not in the main part of the movie. He didn't show up during the main movie, which meant that pretty much guaranteed that he'd be in the mid or after credit scene. It was the mid and pegged what part he was going to play. It's exactly who you think it is. While I still like the idea of Woody Harrelson playing Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage, telling us that Woody Harrelson was in the movie was a pretty big misstep, a pretty big symbiote-covered middle finger. Imagine if we didn't know. Then he showed up when he did in the mid-credit scene. That would have made way more impact than the scene actually did. The scene itself is honestly pretty cheesy the way they did it, though. The way he talks and he says, when I get out of here, I'm going to cause carnage. And it was kind of cheesy, but then again, the idea of Woody Harrelson playing Carnage is awesome. Still, this, along with Hardy's duality, are really the only things that make me want to see another Venom movie. The after credit scene is a bit confusing. No, not really, but it kind of is. Let me explain. Right before the after credit scene, if you want to call it that, the screen says something along the lines of, "Meanwhile, in another universe," or, something like that. Then we get a pretty long preview for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I'm not talking like a minute clip. I'm talking, it's at least a good 5 minutes, if not more. I wasn't really timing it, but it was long. The scene they show almost certainly is part of the whole movie and not something they created for this after credit scene. Why am I confused by this? Why do I say I'm confused? Because it makes me wonder, the way they introduce it, are these movies connected? I know the way they introduced it could have just been a clever way of transitioning to the preview, but what if? What if? Meanwhile, in another universe. What if? Does that mean that Venom, Sony's Venom, is part of the Spider-Verse? If the movies connect somehow, could this be how Venom gets the spider symbol on his chest? Would Venom be animated if he crossed over into the Spider-Verse world? Will the other live-action movies connect to the Spider-Verse? Will we get a solo Spider-Ham movie? There are so many questions now. At the beginning of this video, I had to poke a little fun at Sony's shortcomings. But who knows how they will react after the first few weekends that this movie's out. I don't really know how it's going to go. Like I said earlier, I think critics and audiences, at least in this Rotten Tomatoes world, are going to be split on this one. I'm caught somewhere, again, a little lower of the middle. While there were some things I really liked about the movie, the stuff I didn't far outweighed them. Again, I don't think this is one that I'd even recommend going to see in theaters, but I don't think that's going to stop, well, any of you. If you like this movie, I can understand that. If someone enjoys this movie, I'm not going to say, well, you're wrong. For me, I just found it to be really, really lacking. That's going to be all for this edition of Talkin Movies. If you like what you've heard here, please subscribe to the Real Geno YouTube channel, like this video, and if you have anything to say about this movie, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below. Until next time, we're your hosts, the Real Geno, Geno Reynolds. See you later.